welcome. It's Thursday here at Axiom Medical, and we are thrilled that you were able to join us today for the live stream. This obviously is a follow-up in regards to the webinar that we had this last week. We were looking at the calendars and thinking, wow, how is this already the end of April? So we're going to be hopping into May, but we are thrilled that you were able to join us. Just kind of a quick background and give you an idea of what you're looking at here, who we are, et cetera, in case you stumbled upon this social event in your feed, your social feed. My name is Holly Foxworth. I'm a registered nurse. I'm also the marketing manager for content here at Axiom. And I always have a slew of individuals that join our panel. They're some of the brightest minds in medicine and regulation, et cetera. And so I have another group that's going to be joining us today. It's no different. I do have Chief Marketing Officer Dara Wheeler. We also have lead counsel, both Marcus and Elisabeth. I think you guys maybe had seen them this last week in the webinar. So they're going to be able to cover the questions that we weren't able to get to whenever we were talking about those essential elements for a successful post-pandemic return to work broadcast. So before I move to them and kind of let them introduce themselves, I did want to tell you one thing. We want you to circle your calendars for this next Thursday, because we have another event that's going on, and it's actually called Secret Signs of Substance Abuse. And so, you may ask, why is that relevant to what we have going on? But it's a big deal. And I think that we're all realizing that we are dealing with an epidemic at the same time that we're in this pandemic. And so anytime that you take that isolation, you take the fear, you take the uncertainty, you mix those all together, and it's like you have the perfect recipe for mental health challenges, and then also the substance abuse that comes along with that. And, when you look at the piece about, we always used to think that this was something of a personal nature, but when we step back and we realize that we're spending so much more time with our coworkers than maybe what their family is, it becomes very real. And we see that those that you wouldn't suspect are the ones usually that are struggling the most. So we definitely want you to miss it. We have a guest that's going to be joining us in addition to Dr. Cherry, and he's phenomenal. He actually was a sheriff's deputy and then also a detective. And so he's going to kind of talk about what his journey looked like and how it was that he had fallen victim to some of the addiction issues there. So it's going to be a great event. If you haven't already, please look on our social feed. You'll see access there on how it is that you can access the registration process, along with, we always typically send out emails as well. So keep an eye out for that. We definitely want to see you this next week. Well, why don't we go ahead and just hear from our speakers, let them introduce themselves and kind of tell us their name and then also background and role. Dara, you want to kick us off and go first?
Yeah, great. Thank you, Holly. Thanks for having me. My name is Dara Wheeler. I'm Axiom's Chief Marketing Officer, and I'm happy to be here today talking about this important topic. Thank you.
Fantastic. And Marcus, would you like to go next?
Sure thing. My name is Marcus Bahena. I'm the Lead Counsel of Sales and Administration here at Axiom Medical. Have a lot of expertise in employment, employee benefits law, and also contract negotiation. And just like Dara, I'm also happy to be here.
Awesome. And Elisabeth?
Hi, I'm Elisabeth. I'm Lead Counsel of Legislative Planning and Analysis here at Axiom Medical. My background is in regulatory compliance, and I'm also happy to be here to discuss this important topic with you all.
Oh, that's fantastic. All right, well, let's jump in. The first thing I wanted to kind of bring up that we've seen, it's kind of been surfacing in every area that you look this week, it feels like. But Dara, I wanted your thoughts on some of the discussion that's occurring with some of the health centers that are mandating vaccines. And then it also looked like there was maybe some announcements this week from some of the larger universities that were saying that they may require that of their students. Can you kind of give us some background there or thoughts or what may be going on with that?
Yeah, absolutely, Holly. Axiom is located in the Houston area, so of course we're always very cognizant of what's going on locally. We are hearing local hospital systems are requiring vaccines for employment, and they're taking a pretty hard stance against unvaccinated employees. So there is a potential for losing a position if you are in an unvaccinated status. And I know our legal team, Chuck and Marcus and Elisabeth, have all been tracking this very closely, because this is a typical stance for hospitals. They're definitely concerned about the safety and health of their employees because they are in a high risk category. But in a situation where a vaccination is not yet fully approved by the FDA, this is an interesting stance, and we will be very interested to see how this progresses. Their stance was that basically by a certain date, that you would no longer be employed by the organization if you weren't vaccinated. There's a lot of news coming out in the university systems as well that they are going to require vaccination before you can come back to campus in person. So all of the California university systems, Colorado's announced it. A lot of other states have announced it too. And the requirement will be to be in a vaccinated status before coming back in person. The nuance there that I've been looking at least with the California stance, is that they will wait for the official approval from the FDA. So they will not be taking the stance until that approval is official. And also, they're working very closely with their schools' unions and other groups to make sure that they're taking appropriate actions with the employment law associated with that. But I'm sure Marcus has a lot more experience in employment law around this. But I know we're definitely in some gray area with how organizations are taking this stance.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And the other thing I was going to ask you, and you may not know, but have you heard of them actually kind of putting risk categories on each of the positions, or just making a blanket statement that everybody would have to have it?
At this point, everything I've read has been everybody that is in person. There is no risk categorization. But what I also do know that one of the things our legal team has been paying a lot of attention to is that risk leveling and what that means for organizations. So, like I said, hospitals are very used to taking a pretty strict stance for vaccination, but other organizations will start to have to weigh in on this. And understanding the risk level of your employees is a really important thing to consider, and partnering with an organization to work with you on that is important as well, because you're delving into, again, some very gray areas with a lot of personal protected information. So I think it's going to be a very interesting legal year for sure.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Marcus, we're going to keep you and Elisabeth both busy this year. You'll have your work cut out for you. Well, so Marcus, is in regards to the question that we had specifically, I think it came from Casey. And so she was asking, can you require that employees provide you with proof of what that they have had this vaccine, or, would that kind of put you in dangerous territory in terms of HIPAA, or what's your thoughts there?
My thoughts are, yes, you may ask whether your employee received the vaccine. I believe the ADA and EEOC have stated that a COVID vaccine is not a medical examination. Because it's not a medical examination, it doesn't fall under that purview. It's only once the employer starts asking follow-up questions like, hey, Susie, how come you haven't received the vaccine yet? Hey, Susie, how come you choose not to receive the vaccine? Susie could have a disability or a closely held religious belief, or she could be pregnant or lactating. Once she has this, when you start asking these questions, these are considered medical examinations, and they are either protected by the ADA or Title IX. So yes, you may ask whether your employee received the vaccine, but I'll stop right there.
Wow. Okay. And so in terms of then what they are asking, so are you saying then that if they were going to go down that route, they may want to also, I would assume you'd want to make for sure that you had a policy that was backing that up and supporting that, correct?
I would have a policy in place. Policies are always great to have, but again, it's just more the follow-up questions. Make sure you don't start getting too personal. Start inquiring more into things that the employer shouldn't be aware of or should know.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Well, let's move on to the next one. I think it was Steffi that sent that one in and was asking about OSHA reporting. She was saying that they're pretty clear with what is occurring with some of the OSHA stance there, but she was wanting to know if in the event that there was an employee that was exposed to a workplace COVID, had a workplace exposure there, and then ultimately had tested positive, would they still need to document that there on their OSHA logs, or does that, how would you prefer that they handle that, or how would you recommend that they handle that?
So in this case, OSHA record-keeping requirements mandates that covered employers record certain workplace-related injuries and illnesses under the OSHA 300 log. COVID-19 can be a recordable illness if a worker is infected as a result of a work-related duty. However, employers are only responsible to record this COVID-19 this COVID-19 case if all three of the following conditions are met. And in this case, the first condition would be the case is a confirmed COVID-19 case, whether it be a presumptive positive COVID-19 case or a laboratory confirmed case of COVID-19. And the second condition is that the case is a work-related case. So I would assume that the employer could trace the COVID-19 exposure of this employee to the workplace duty assigned to this employee. And 3, the case involved one or more of the general recording criteria, such as medical treatment beyond first aid and days away from work by the employee. So if you're unable to trace the COVID-19 exposure to the workplace, it's not likely that you'll be required to report the case on the OSHA log. So with that being said, I guess depending if you are able to trace the source of the COVID-19 exposure, that will determine whether or not you are required to report this in your OSHA log.
Gotcha. Okay. Hey, and not to throw a curveball at you, sorry guys, but one of the things that I looked at yesterday was there was a notification. I think it was about Southwest Airlines. I don't know, Dara, you may have seen it as well. But anyways, it was an attempt again by an employee that was attempting to file suit, saying that her spouse had gotten COVID and died and was attempting to put blame on the employer. Do you feel like that we maybe see more of these? I mean, I would assume that it'd be very difficult to prove, but is that just kind of, further reiterate the importance of making sure that you have a really strong policy and you are giving employees that education, documenting, et cetera?
I can jump in a little bit if you don't mind.
Anybody, yeah, anybody. You bet.
Okay. I for sure. If you're in a state that is not as company and corporate friendly, it's be sure to have your policies in place. Make sure that you can actually prove and go down the trail that you did everything possible to protect your employees. So again, like in some states, you're going to need that. In other states, possibly like Texas or Florida, there are going to be a lot of corporate protective laws that are coming in place that basically, if you get COVID in the workplace, you're prevented from suing or going after the company. So it's have your policies in place, but also examine what state you're in, because that probably will dictate how you should maneuver and set up your policies.
Good information. Yeah.
That's really interesting. And, to both your points, I do think record keeping and policy is important, but I think to Holly's point that I don't want to miss either is educating and communicating with your employees. I do think really being open about plans and safety and health and how a company is going to approach it is a critical component of this. And if companies, whatever state they're in, are open and communicating clearly with their employees, I think they're going to maybe not prevent all of this from occurring, but they'll definitely get a lot of buy-in from their organization and the direction they're going. So the way I read that, and it was definitely an attention-grabbing clickbait article, but the way I read the Southwest lawsuit is she didn't feel very supported from her organization. And so whether she can prove that she contracted COVID at the workplace and then brought it back home to her husband and that caused his death, that, like Holly said, that may be really difficult to prove. But in the feelings, or at least through this lawsuit, her explaining that she felt unsupported or not healthy or safe in her workplace, that was a critical piece. And again, it may just be part of the clickbait article that I read, but it also, I do think it's an important point for employers to make sure that they're very clear and open with their employees.
I agree. Great information, Dara. Let's see. All right, let's go on to, was it Michael that had the next one? I think Michael was the next one. So he was saying that, this is basically where he was talking about MSHA. He was saying that, we're all basically kind of expecting OSHA to produce and publish some new guidance in terms of workplace safety in the coming times. Do you anticipate that we may see some of that by MSHA as well?
Yeah.
Elisabeth?
Yeah, so this is a great question. So OSHA and MSHA are two different federal regulatory agencies, and OSHA has a more broader authority over both private and some public sectors, whereas MSHA regulatory authority is primarily confined to the mining industry. However, in cases where the federal Safety Health Act does not have an applicable standard, or the safe and health issue is not it does not pertain to mining. OSHA has jurisdiction, and the OSHA regulation has precedent in that case. However, in 2020, in response to the COVID-19 outbreak, MSHA did issue an emergency temporary standard providing guidance for mitigating and preventing COVID-19 in the workplace. And their guidance was closely related to the CDC and OSHA guidelines. So we should expect that any MSHA guidelines provided will be closely related to the CDC and the guidelines. Also, if MSHA does not come out with a more permanent standard for infectious disease control, we should also assume that the OSHA infectious disease control policy will take precedent and will fill in that gap that is not provided by MSHA.
Ooh, good information. Yeah, that's great, Elisabeth. Let's see. I think we had one more question, and Marcus, I may come to you on this one. This one was from Patty, and so I think she was wanting to know that there had been a lot of changes, it looks like, with implementation of many of the state mandatory family leave benefits. And so she was asking, does it feel like that adds additional layer of risk to the employer? And in addition to that, do you have any tips for effectively managing the multiple state benefit changes?
Yes, this is a very interesting question too. I was an employee benefits attorney for around a year. So this is very exciting for any ERISA attorney, that we've been constantly just inundated with new state laws, new federal laws, basically almost every day. So if you are not aware of these changes, obviously it's gonna implicate all the FMLA penalties, and you're gonna be in violation of all these regs. One of the things that you can do, or that we've been here at Axiom have had the benefit of having not specialty attorneys, but attorneys who specialize in certain categories here. Again, I had a strong employment law, employee benefits background, and I worked with our HR department to make sure we were in compliance from day one. So with a strong legal department and a strong HR department, I think you can make sure all your companies in compliance. Axiom started off in Texas, but then we started expanding into other areas, other states like California, Colorado, and New York, who are much more employee friendly than Texas. So it was with the strong legal department and HR department that we make sure we had it together. If you don't have that, you can speak with outside counsel to make sure you're in compliance with all the updated laws. One of the things that I do is I subscribe to many employee benefits publications, and they send me daily updates to make sure, if there's a change in California, change in even LA, that I'm provided some sort of notice. And also, if you're lazy and kind of want to cheat, California is always a good place to start with, and California is the most employee-friendly place you could ever be. So if you want to just set your laws to your regulations to comply with California, I'm sure you would probably almost be compliant in every other state.
That's a pretty good.
I'm Axiom's attorney. I'm not your attorney. So all legal advice is if you really want legal advice, seek outside counsel. So I just want to put that little disclaimer in there.
That's great. Yes, absolutely, Marcus. I love it. Well, before we wrap up, is there any kind of closing remarks that any of you want to share? Dara, you have anything you want to close with?
Yeah, great. Thank you, Holly. Like I said, I think we're in for a really exciting time. I think a lot of plaintiff attorneys are going to have a field day over the next year or two. It's going to be interesting. And I think that we've seen this gray kind of realm that we're living in. And it's going to be really interesting because, and I think we've talked a lot about this in some of our webinars and some of our live streams, in that for the first time for a lot of employers, COVID has bridged that gap between personal and work related. And although we've seen that with some other outbreaks like H1N1 and on some smaller scale, the scale of this is so much bigger than what we've experienced before. So for organizations, there's a lot to navigate through. Like Marcus said, get good advice. We can't give you legal advice, but we can definitely help guide those conversations. And if you have any concerns or questions, we're always here to support our clients and our prospects and teams through this. And it will be something that we keep a close eye on and help everybody figure out what to do with next.
Fantastic. Marcus, Elizabeth, either one of you have anything you want to add to that?
I'll just touch on, I know Dara spoke earlier about a lot of the Houston hospitals doing mandatory vaccines, and people think that, that's obviously, people might think it's illegal. It's not, as long as, you kind of have to do a delicate dance. If it is job related, the ADA permits employers to require vaccines under a qualification standard. It's basically, and if you don't receive the vaccine, that the individual pose a direct threat to the health and safety of the workplace. So obviously, if you don't receive the vaccine, COVID has been determined by the EEOC that it is a direct threat. And so it's okay there. And also another reason why it's okay in the hospital setting is because, like I said, it's under the ADA, and under the ADA, you have to provide reasonable accommodations. In a lot of places, we're working remotely. That reasonable accommodation would work. In the hospital healthcare setting, this telehealth has grown and has been grown in acceptance, but it's not accepted everywhere. So that they require those nurses and doctors to be in the workplace. So because it's a direct threat and because they're unable to provide any accommodation that would prevent the direct threat, that's why healthcare systems are allowed or can require the employees to receive the vaccine as a condition of employment.
Great information. How about you, Elizabeth?
I'll say I'll just kind of cap off the webinar with, although OSHA is coming out with their directives, I think it's definitely important for employers to have that balance between their policies and communication. As Dara stated earlier, is that we have to communicate, because you can have the policies on hand, and if the employees are not aware, if they don't feel like the employer has their best interest at hand, a lot of issues can arise in that case. So we definitely want to keep bridging that gap in that area as well.
Awesome. Guys, thank you so much for joining us today. You've been a wealth of knowledge, and I really appreciate your willingness to come back and kind of give some clarification, some additional information around some of these questions that were here. Just to kind of wrap up the final announcements, again, if you haven't already, please make sure that you sign up for that webinar that's going to be there on Thursday. I know I get excited about every webinar, but this one really, it means a lot to me, and I think that it will help all of you as well, especially in your workplaces that are there. If you have any questions about deploying a vaccine program, we also have a white paper that's free. You can access that on our website. And obviously, if you have any questions about checking to work or anything it is that we cover, please don't hesitate to reach out and contact us. We are more than happy to help you in any way that we possibly can. So we look forward to seeing you next week. If you have any questions, you're welcome to send those to us to our email address, where we answer all the various questions within the webinar, which is coronavirus@axiomllc.com. Anybody can submit, and we're happy to take all the questions there. So thanks again. We'll see you Thursday, and have a good day.